I am not this body. And today I know that only the body can die, not me. I will never forget that day. I could barely drive my car. And when I finally got home, I just wanted to go to bed. I reached for the door. Go to the forest. That voice in my head. Go to the forest now. I stumbled, losing consciousness, and I blacked out. I don't know for how long I was gone. I had lost the perception of time. It was morning when I woke up and started to walk back home again. And little did I know that from now on, nothing would ever be the same again. I only wanted to die, but still I was afraid of dying. Now I don't want to die, but I have no fear of death at all.
Ooh, I'm getting emotional. And that's okay. You know, okay, I'm going to be honest with you because I feel I can. And I just want to say that you are restoring my faith in men. Thank you for just doing all of the incredible deep work that you've needed to do so that you could ascend and help females to feel that they can trust men again. I am just deeply, deeply grateful for you, and anyway, I just really wanted you to know that. Bless you, beautiful soul.
I don't think you will ever fully understand how meaningful it was for me to hear that. What? Can I make people feel like that? Really? Thank you, Deb. Bless you. Bless you, my friend. We came from the north, moved down to the middle part of Sweden when I was about 4 years old. Mom, Dad, me, and my 3-year-old sister. I have a few very clear memories from that period of time. I remember paying a lot of attention to sounds and shapes and colors. You see, I have synesthesia, a perceptual phenomenon in which the stimulation of one sense simultaneously produces sensation in a different modality. For example, seeing the shape or color of a sound. Letters and numbers may have different colors, smells, or other sensory perceptions attached to them, like you can feel the texture of a smell, or hear what the taste of the food you eat would sound like. Although classified as a condition, being synesthetic really amplifies the perception in lots of different areas in a positive way, and to me, especially in music. Still today when I record music, I can think in terms like, this guitar needs to sound a little more yellow, or the cymbals on the drum kit sounds like sunlight reflected in wet asphalt after a heavy rain. And I remember at the age of 5 or 6, this inner knowing, like an inner voice saying, this is what you came here to do, sound. Little did I know that following the guidance of that inner voice would be a long, difficult and crooked path to walk, with a lot of distractions. I grew up in a small suburban neighborhood, countryside, hillbilly / post-industrial mentality, where boys did boy stuff and girls did girl stuff. And there was a lot of masculine energy around, like tractors, V8 cars, hunting, fishing, drinking beer, watching football, that kind of thing. And quite early on, I felt like a misfit, I wasn't really interested in any of that. I was an empath. I could stare and admire the leaves in a tree, or simply gaze at the stars, and I could be moved to tears by a beautiful piece of music already as a child. I talked to nature, to trees, to animals, the sky, the moon, the water, the air, and I felt connected to them. A connection that would soon be lost. And I didn't really have anyone to share this with. There were a few older kids that always picked on or were mean to younger kids. This wasn't real Lord of the Flies stuff going on. I was always a little afraid when I saw them, because you never knew what they would do to you. I remember being forced to close my eyes and open my mouth, and then they poured a glass of sand in my mouth. I always did as they said, otherwise I would get beaten, or so they said. And I remember once being forced to lick on a metal pole in the middle of the winter, and my tongue got stuck. But the most unpleasant memory was being led out in the woods. This memory would haunt me for the rest of my life. They apologized for their deeds and offered friendship instead. I was thrilled. Eventually we got to a quite big wooden cross by a tree. They tied me up to the cross using twine, and then they said, "Are you really that stupid that you think we would want to be friends with you?" And they started laughing and took off, and left me hanging there, crying and afraid. A lady walking her dog came by and untied me. I didn't tell my parents any of this, and this happened in broad daylight. I was not allowed to be out that late. I was just a child. But I had already started to learn not to bitch or complain more than necessary. I was 6 years old. My parents didn't have the most loving relationship. There were no arguments or anything like that, but there was clearly suppression in the atmosphere. I have no memory of seeing them hug or kiss each other, or speaking kind words to each other. Mom was mom and dad was dad. But there was never a mom and dad. No sense of togetherness. They were obviously not happy together. Anyway, they seemed to have a very typical relationship where two unhealed hearts tries to find happiness in their partner rather than healing their own wounds. I would later on learn all about that myself. I picked up a lot from my childhood environment, and in general from the Swedish mentality at that time, like one shouldn't complain, get with the program, get an education, get a job, pay taxes, contribute to society, get a family, be grateful, shut up, stop complaining, get older, get sicker, retire, and die. Quit daydreaming, music doesn't put food on the table, get a real job. Still today, Sweden's biggest online second-hand store has musical instruments listed under the category spare time and hobby. As if being an artist or a musician is not to be considered a real job. Although this mentality didn't align to my vision of life, I didn't know any better than to adjust myself to it. Already at 8 years old, I thought the entire way of life as I knew it seemed to be nothing more than a slave system. Honestly, people going to work, pressing a button on a machine in some factory 8 hours a day, do they really do that because they want to do that by choice? I just couldn't understand. Is life really not supposed to be more than just fighting for survival? If not, what's the point of living at all? I wondered. My parents divorced when I was 12. From that day on, I felt like I was on my own. It was clear to me that talking about it was not admirable. Don't mention the war. And from my perspective, due to the lack of emotional engagement, I remember when being told about the upcoming divorce, I couldn't show that I was sad, so I hid behind a shed and cried in solitude, in shame, because boys don't cry. I started to shut myself off and became more of an introvert. My mom recently told me that my upset teacher once called her and said, "I was having a talk with Jonas today and he was talking about killing himself." I was about 11 at that time. Oh, I was a daydreamer, all right. Once I was just staring out the window from the corridor in school. I leaned my forehead to the glass and very softly started to tap my head to the glass. It was just a rhythmic thing. My mind was elsewhere, and I didn't even notice that I progressively started to hit my head harder and harder to the window. Crash. There was glass everywhere, and I had a bleeding forehead. When asked what happened, I couldn't really explain. I mean, what could I say? Hey, I was just drumming a rhythm with my head to the window. I never meant to break it. My mom moved away, and my sister, a few years later, I stayed with my father. A deeper sense of unworthiness began to take root, and I felt like a freak, unable to find a place to fit in. It didn't do me any better to know that most teachers in school told me that I was inattentive, disruptive, and absent-minded. I was being yelled at and chastised, and one teacher even told me that I would never succeed in anything in life being the way I am. When I was a pre-teen, there was a local man, a sort of an outcast, living here. He invited me and my friend into the locker room down by the lake. He asked us to pull down our pants and then sat down in front of us and masturbated. I don't remember why we agreed to do it. Maybe we were shocked. I don't really know. I was 12. I never really thought of it as sexual abuse, but it was. And we were just kids. In this world I found myself in, music was my sanctuary. I always found comfort in it. And that was very confusing to me, because music, being the world to me, I had learned to perceive as that little insignificant thing you're supposed to do in your spare time. I just didn't understand. I started playing drums, then guitar, and a little piano, and I got into a band with a few childhood friends. And this is when I really discovered music. And I remember it was so frustrating, having all these ideas, like epic scores in my head all the time. Oh, I could hear it all within. The choirs, harmony vocals, brass, woodwinds, cellos. But I couldn't do anything with it, because I had nothing to record on, let alone enough musicians to play with. But none of that really mattered, because I was so lost that I was only doing the best I could to fit in and get the approval of my environment. I started smoking and drinking and going to parties, and yes, I tried out all kinds of drugs. And in my teens, I had completely forgotten my initial innate perception of this world as being wondrous. And so I tried to believe that this physical reality is all there is. No faith, no hope, no belief, no divinity. It was all just a crock of shit to me at that time. However, sometimes I did things on my own that I didn't really understand, that just made me feel more freaky and weird. I could go out in the woods, lie down and just squeeze the soil and grass in my hands. And I didn't understand why. I know now that I was grounding myself, that a part of me was seeking to re-establish that lost connection. Hallå, är det Roy?
Ja, det är Roy. Hej.
Hej, det är Jonas Lidström.
Ja, hejsan. Det var länge sedan, hörru.
Ja, det var verkligen länge sedan. Men du kom ihåg mig?
Ja, jag kommer ihåg dig. Jag kommer ihåg alla som visade framfötterna, liksom. Jag kände igen mig i dig. Jag kommer ihåg det. Jag kommer ihåg dem, just när du berättade om det där så liksom kommer minnet tillbaka om hur det var, liksom. När vi den här kampen för att få de här på gymnasiet att lyssna på vad jag hade att säga, liksom, om dig.
Jag kommer ju även att gestalta dig i filmen.
Ja, oj då.
Du får överseende med om jag kanske får dig att se ut som en stel kontorsnisse.
Ja.
In high school, I had a wonderful music teacher, Roy. Such a beautiful soul. This is when I realized that even though you finally get what you've been yearning, like being seen for who you truly are, accepted and uplifted, you simply can't handle it. You can't receive it, as long as you carry your baggage from the past. As human beings, we are creatures of habit and often get scared when exposed to something new, even though it's of a positive nature. This is very common in relationships, when two unhappy individuals seek their happiness in each other rather than healing their own traumas by looking within themselves first. Every form of healing always lies within ourselves, not in others. Anyway, Roy, graduation was at the horizon, and it was clear that I would not have grades enough to get into the gymnasium's music program. This is when Roy entered the stage. He set up meetings with the principals and other teachers from both schools, and almost like a lawyer in court started to arguments on my behalf.
Come on, don't be shy. This boy is so talented in music that it would be a complete waste to see him enter a program as a car mechanic or something like that. Isn't there something we can do to overlook this or help him out?
I was touched and shocked. He really saw me. At first I didn't understand. What? Who? Me? Talented? He managed to arrange an additional year, customized for my needs only, to enable me to raise my grades and at the same time allow me to play music most of the time so that I could stimulate my passion for it and to keep myself motivated to get into the music program the following year. He really made an effort on my behalf. No self-interest, simply helping and uplifting another human being out of love and compassion. I felt seen for the first time, and it felt so good. Thank you, Roy. Bless you. I didn't make it through that year though. I quit halfway through and moved to Västerås where my mother lived, and there I finally made it into music school. But being me at that time, still carrying my luggage from the past, being lost, stubborn, and with a quite severe ADD, undiagnosed at the time, I once again dropped out. Remember the wooden cross in the forest? One of the first things I learned was that there actually are people who practice violence on others just for fun. Completely by surprise, I was kicked down. This guy came running toward me. It all happened so fast. And all of a sudden I was on the ground. Welcome to Västerås. And before I really knew what happened, two others joined in and they dragged me to the other side of the road, out on an open field. I felt their kicks like a hailstorm all over my body. They were shouting something. I tried to curl up my body as much as I could and cover my face with my hands. They kicked me in the head, and it started to taste like blood in my mouth. The pain shut off surprisingly fast. I lost my breath for a while when I got kicked in my back. The wooden cross in the forest. And so came that lady again, walking her dog. This time in shape of a taxi driver. I heard him yell, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" He scared them off, and he and his passenger, a really kind and brave woman, pulled me into the cab. I was half conscious, and my first priority was to say, "No hospital, no hospital," since my biggest concern was to make sure that my parents wouldn't find out any of this. Dad would probably get mad at me, and Mom would probably never let me out again. At least that was what I thought. This woman in the cab, she didn't even know me. I mean, from her point of view, I could have just as well been the violent madman starting the fight. I heard them talking. What you would do with him? "I'll take him home to my place," the woman said. I woke up the next morning with cotton in my mouth, all patched up. My white shirt was blood-stained and had footprints all over. And amazingly, I managed to keep the knowing of this event away from my parents. I was 17. I met a new friend, Michael, equally weird and freaky like me. He was one of the most meaningful persons to me at that time. We got very close, We played music together, reading Carlos Castaneda and such, and had deep discussions about life. He was like a brother to me. About a year after the beating, I overheard a conversation in a coffee shop. Two girls talking about this Kim and a few others that beat the shit out of some poor guy last year that was new in town. I instantly knew they were talking about me. And it turned out that Michael knew who this guy was. They grew up in the same neighborhood. Later on I met him. He didn't remember me, but I remembered him. He introduced himself, shaking my hand, smiled and said, "Hi, how are you? I'm Kim. Nice to meet you." I thought to myself, well, this is quite a contrast from the last time we met. But as usual, I didn't say anything. I just smiled back to him and introduced myself. A few years later, Michael and I would eventually lose contact when I moved back to where I came from. And it's funny how things happen sometimes. Every now and then I thought, I'm gonna call Michael. It's been too long now. 13 years since the last time I saw him. I was going down to Västerås again to visit my mom. And my mother said, "You know, Michael that you used to be friends with, could this really be him?" She brought a newspaper. Michael's obituary. He had died. Bless his soul. In 1998, I was asked to join a band. Again, I didn't understand. Who? Little me? They were well established in the area, older, very talented, and they asked if I wanted to join as a bass player. First of all, I had never really played the bass before, and if not for some persuasion, the unworthy part of me would have declined this offer. You know, just another wooden cross in the forest, I thought. The following years, touring throughout Sweden and eventually across Europe, was the happiest time of my life. I felt that I served a purpose. I felt appreciated, and I deeply want to express my love and gratitude to my beautiful friends who invited me to be a part of their musical journey, our musical journey. Members past and present, thank you. Anders, Mats, Dennis, Petti, Ylva, Therese, Josefin, Andreas, Henrik, Jim, Steppen, Magnus. Thank you so much. I don't think you will ever fully understand. Or yeah, you probably do. Eventually, I moved back to where I once came from. This decision was truly made from a state of unworthiness. Go back home, find a job, don't complain. And so I did, always haunted by the feeling of something missing. Just trying to find my peace. Whatever I was looking for always seemed to be beyond the horizon, like trying to catch the rainbow's gold, always out of reach. I didn't realize at that time that the solution to my sense of being lost was there within myself all the time. I thought I was running towards something, but in fact, I was trying to run away from myself. From that time, everything snowballed. Found myself in one dysfunctional relationship after the other, struggling to please others, struggling to find my own peace, struggling with jobs and finances, struggle. Life was nothing but a game of survival. And eventually it seemed that I wouldn't survive that game. I had a daughter, bless her. The relationship with her mother ended up in heartbreak and misery, followed by a custody dispute, court with lawyers, and the whole 9 yards. It was a tough time for everybody. And I am so grateful to say now that today we have a wonderful relationship. It almost feels like none of that really happened, just like a dream. And this is the true power of love and forgiveness. Forgiveness of self and others. And after that, when my next long-term relationship ended, I was truly a wreck. I really started to question the meaning of life. One of my friends suggested that I go see a doctor for an ADD diagnosis. I did. Full score on the testing. In this evaluation there was a lot of digging into the past, like childhood memories, relations, traumas, behaviors, and there was a lot coming up to surface. I felt more and more lost. I started to put blame on my parents and my environment without realizing that they didn't choose to be broken any more than I did. None of us do. We all do the best we can from our own level of awareness. Not until I was on the other side of the fence, so to speak, was I able to transmute the bitterness I held against them to love, to forgive them, but most importantly, loving and forgiving myself. I felt that my past was just a big bad dream. I no longer had a past to identify myself with, and I had no vision of future to look forward to. I felt existentially homeless, like a nobody, a failure, a loser, nothing, and I was tired of struggling, and I gave up. And so came the time when I decided to die. And it seemed that the lady walking her dog wouldn't show up this time. Are you alive yet? Are you? Do you really know who you are? Are you alive yet?